Hi, friends. How are you today? I am your host, Heather, and you are listening to Brewing Murder and Mystery. I deeply, deeply apologize for my absence for the last 2 weeks, but I had some health stuff. Going on. I'm okay. Yes, Mom, I know you're watching. I'm fine. It was more like panicky attack stuff. If you deal with panic attacks, I am so sorry. I went through a massive one and I legit thought I was dying. So doing a podcast was not top priority. Sorry. And now I'm back. I'm feeling very much on the verge of another. No, just kidding. I'm feeling a lot better. Um, but then it just seems like life is against me right now. So I'm going to pull through and be like, screw you. I'm going to do my stuff anyway. For example, if you notice that the video quality is not up to par, I couldn't get it to work. I could not get my camera to work for the life of me, so I'm using my laptop camera. And I washed my makeup brushes because I was going to do my makeup for you guys, and everything is still sopping wet. It doesn't matter that it's been more than 12 hours since I washed them, they're wet. And then to just top it off, my self-esteem has taken a dump, y'all. I don't know what that is about, but it is just plummeted for some reason. So I put on my fancy shirt, which I absolutely love. It gives me like all the like Wednesday Morticia Adams vibes. And I thought I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna be there. I'm gonna be there for my subscribers. Oh my goodness, I am so excited to be at like 72 subscribers. I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but if y'all were sitting in a room with me, I'd be like overwhelmed. So amazing. Thank you so much. If you want to continue to see this train wreck, just like and subscribe. And I'm here for you on Tuesdays, except for the last two when I almost died mentally. Today, we're going to just jump right into this episode. It is a weird one because nobody dies from murder or kidnap. Okay, it's weird. Nobody killed anybody. So that's why it's really strange of a case. But it's totally worth an episode because of the strangeness and frankly the ick factor of the situation. George Carl Tanzler, who went by Carl, was born on February 8th of 1877 in Germany. And as a young boy, he grew up in what was known as the German Empire, but somehow ended up in Australia before World War One started. Before World War One started. Woo, that just was like a super tongue twister. He had a desire to travel the world and to go to India and then Australia, but he stopped in Australia for supplies. And before you knew it, he had found interest in becoming an engineer in electrical work. And he bought a plot of land. And then it was like, boom, 10 years had gone by. I know what that's like. Life just happens when you're having a good time. So he didn't actually do all the traveling that he had set out to do. And when he finally got around to the idea of getting back on his original plan, the war broke out. He actually ended up being taken to a concentration camp for safekeeping. Like, oh, okay. Do you know what they do at concentration camps? Because safe would not be a word I would use for them. He managed to not have any real harm come to him. And then at one point, they actually transferred locations to what they called Trial Bay, which was basically a castle-like prison. It was even on the side of a cliff. Like, it's fairy tale castle, but the dungeon. So is it really fairy tale? Probably not. When the end of the war drew near, the prisoners were not permitted to go home, shipped off to Holland. Carl was a sailor before all of this, though, and somehow secretly built himself a sailboat because he really desperately wanted to try to get home to his mom and make sure that she was safe. And I'm just dumbfounded because unless this was like a Huckleberry Finn type raft with a sheet tied to it and he's calling it a sailboat, How does one go about secretly building a sailboat? First of all, how much time does that take? And second of all, nobody saw it. I don't know if this was a makeshift thing or what, but he managed to actually sail it back to Germany. And then he found his mom. So thankfully, she was alive. She was as well as could possibly be for someone who had just been through a war. And he managed for 3 years to be with her and witness kind of the aftermath of the war. People were trying to get back to some form of normalcy, but returning to normalcy in Germany was really, really hard. During this time, though, he did actually manage to marry a lady named Doris Schaefer. It was 1920 at this time, and they actually had 2 children together. Am I saying actually a lot? Because I actually think I am. I digress. His mother suggested that he move him and his family to the United States and live with his sister because life in Germany was just really, really difficult. They didn't really want him raising his family with all of the things that were going on there post-war. Taking his family along, he would end up sailing to Cuba and then make it to Florida, finding a place just outside of Tampa. But once he was in America, he abandoned his family. Like, why not just leave him in Germany? Of course, we have no real information about what that was all about, but he just straight up abandoned them. So, his poor wife and children. But he found himself living with his sister, who had also been in Florida, and working as an immigrant. He found a job as a radiology technician in the U.S. Marine Hospital in Key West, Florida. He went by the name Carl von Kossel. This was a good place to talk about a previous side note because it's important to the story. Carl claimed that while he was still a child, his family traveled to Italy. When he was there, a vision from a dead ancestor visited him as his dreams over and over and over again. Like, this happened multiple times. The ancestor revealed to him his true love. And apparently she was a very exotic, dark-haired woman. When he met Dolores, he knew that she couldn't possibly be his true love because she didn't have dark hair. But then it's like, why did you marry her? And why did you have children if you were still holding on to this image of who your true love was going to be? Who the heck knows? But he ends up marrying her while he still has a desire to search for his true love. Around the time that he had abandoned his family and started working in the hospital, tuberculosis was in full force. The hospitals were getting crowded. Tuberculosis at the time was a death sentence, so patients coming in with this diagnosis were just sitting around basically waiting to die, which is just awful. It never seems to fail that when you watch any kind of ghost hunter show, they always seem to find some abandoned tuberculosis center. Well, this is that time period. This is when all the body shoots and all the things were happening. As he's working in the hospital, along comes a young woman named Elena. She was brought in there from symptoms, and her mom wanted to have her evaluated. Now, prior to the sickness, Elena had been married, but her husband left her after she had a miscarriage. Like, what a you-know-what. I mean, that's hard enough to go through, but then your husband abandons you. I roll. If you're listening, I roll. But there was no divorce, so legally she was still married to her non-existent husband. He had bounced out, but no divorce was actually filed. When she was diagnosed with tuberculosis, she was accepted into the same hospital that Carl worked for. When Carl saw Elena for the first time, he immediately remembered his vision and became obsessed with her because he believed that she was his true love. It was love at first sight, or I should say obsession at first sight. Carl self-proclaimed that he had medical knowledge, and he started treating Elena. He used various treatments such as remedies, x-rays, and other medical equipment. He also showered Elena with gifts. These gifts included clothing and jewelry, and he went as far as professing his undying love for her. Now, there's no record of Elena feeling the same way for him, whether it be that maybe he was much older than she was at the time, or the fact that she didn't want to start a romance with her looming death sentence in her future. But despite all of this, Carl's best efforts to save Elena's life, she would succumb to tuberculosis on October 25th of 1931. Now, this is when you would think that the story would end and Carl would move on, but he didn't. To everybody's shock of the family, Carl paid for the entire funeral, and then he asked permission to commission and construct an above-ground mausoleum in Key West Cemetery, which he had the only key to, and he would visit her every single night for 2 years. At least that's what people thought. Because at the end of the 2 years, Carl's visiting Elena just abruptly stopped in 1933. Now, this aroused a little bit of suspicion with the cemetery workers and the family. They thought, well, he's just moving on. Like the grief, whatever he had going on with her has finally passed and he's just getting on with his life. But little did they know that was not the case. The reason why he stopped visiting the cemetery was not because he lost interest in the love of his life or that he was too busy, but Carl no longer needed to visit Elena at the cemetery because he had actually taken his beloved home with him. Yeah, he put her in a toy wagon and just carted her home. Now you can imagine it's been 2 years. She doesn't look fresh. Not fresh at all. Now, Carl, being the only one with a key, that nobody would realize Elena was even missing. It's just crazy, like mind-blowing crazy. How does somebody who never married her get away with being the only key holder? Like, come on, family, what is that about? Now, Carl liked to do things in secret that other people didn't seem to know anything about. He first constructs a sailboat that nobody knows about. And now he's found an old airplane where he's constructed a laboratory with the idea to keep somebody's body from slowly decomposing. As far as trying to figure out how to keep the flesh intact, he would use mortician's wax and paper mache to keep the face looking as close to realistic as possible. He would use silk coverings, and he stuffed her torso full of rags so that it would keep its shapely figure. He even inserted glass eyeballs because her own eyeballs had completely decomposed at this time. If that's not weird enough, he would use wire coat hangers to form limbs, basically making makeshift bones to maintain the body's structure. On top of this, you would think that there would be a smell, right? Like decomposing body. But he would just cover the body in flowers, perfumes, and disinfectants. Her scalp was even rotting away, and he made her a makeshift wig. Now, I don't know where he got Elena's hair from, but it says that he asked her mother for her own hair, and this is what he fashioned the wig out of. I don't know why the mom had hair. I don't know what this is about, but he managed to make her a wig from her own hair. Because he was so in love with her, he even put Elena's corpse in his bed at night and slept with her for 7 years. 7 years. Yeah. Did your eyeballs just pop out of your head? Because, Now, rumors started going around town because Carl kept coming to town buying things like flowers, jewelry, women's clothing. But people knew that he wasn't married. Well, he was married, remember? He just abandoned them. But as far as the locals knew, he didn't have a wife. He wasn't even dating. And it was like, where are these gifts going? They would have noticed if somebody around town was wearing the jewelry and the flowers and the dress that he would purchase constantly. A young boy even rode by his house and then told people that he witnessed Carl dancing with a life-size doll. It was really strange on its own to see somebody dancing in their living room, but with a giant life-size doll. Rumors about his strange behavior only got worse and worse, leading all the way to Elena's family. Now, Elena's sister decided to drop it on Carl because she really thought he had done so much for their family. It would just be good to check in on him. Now, when she arrives to Carl's house, she finds it completely unsettling because sitting there in his living room is a life-size doll that is giving very close to Elena vibes. This is so unsettling that Elena's sister actually contacts authority. She's like, I don't know what is going on, but he has a doll that is super creepy and reminds me of my sister. And it had been 7 years at this point. As far as the family knew, Elena was still in the mausoleum at the Key West Cemetery. Police would arrive, and after doing some tests, they would be shocked and mortified to find out that this life-size doll was in fact the deceased body of Elena. Of course, the family was furiously upset. This was morbid. This was defamation of their family member. So Carl goes to trial. Now, what they arrest him for is grave robbing, and they do a mental evaluation and find him mentally competent to stand trial, which is really interesting considering the things that he would say. Super unhinged stuff. Like he would say Elena's spirit would come and visit him every single night while he was next to her body in the mausoleum and just beg Carl to take her out of there, that she didn't want to be in that resting place, but she wanted to live with him at his house. He said that he was going to use an airship, which I am assuming is a spaceship, to take Elena's body high into the atmosphere so that radiation from outer space could preserve her tissues and restore her life. That sounds like a crazy person, but apparently not. Carl would not serve any time, unfortunately, because even though what he did was horrifying to the public and the family of Elena, the statute of limitations for grave robbing had expired at this time, and Carl Tanzler was allowed to go free without any consequences. What would you even do in that situation? And if that wasn't enough, Elena's body wasn't even returned to its original resting place because so many people had heard about her in the news and what Carl had done that they actually sent her off to be displayed for curious onlookers. And it was this morbid case that just so many people were obsessed with that they said that over 70,000 people would actually come to see her before she was finally put to rest in an unmarked grave back in the Key West Cemetery. Now, what they didn't feel like they could release to the public, but I mean, it's 2024 and we want all of the gory details, was that Carl had actually given her a cardboard shaft tubing placed in the groin area to create a vaginal canal. Investigators wanted to believe that Tanzler just did this for structural integrity, but let's face it, he was probably using it for sexual gratification, and that is disgusting. Disgusting. We don't have any other information about what he did to the body, which partially is, I have an imagination. I don't need to know. But the details of the case were so shocking and depraved that the public really didn't know about it for a really long time. It's just icky. It's icky. Tanzler would continue to live alone. He wouldn't remarry, and he wouldn't go back to his wife or his children, and he would end up dying alone in Florida in 1952. And yes, this was a really short case, but it's really bizarre and it's really strange, and I felt like it was worth revisiting. So if you haven't heard about Carl Tanzler and all the craziness, now you have. And if you have heard of Carl Tanzler, yikes. What do you guys think about this case? I mean, this is clearly somebody who love is eternal and undying, and he took it to a whole new level. Thanks for listening, and I hope you can pick your mouth up off the floor and move on with your day. I appreciate you. Thanks for watching. Bye.